The galaxy held its breath as the news spread like wildfire. The Galactic Empire had just executed hundreds of women from conquered worlds, publicly, ruthlessly, for nothing more than their defiance. It was a cold, calculated display of power, a message that echoed across every star system that the Empire could, and would, do anything to maintain control. Yet, this time, something was different. Humanity had reached its breaking point. A broadcast intercepted by resistance cells showed the women hanging from colossal pylons, stripped of dignity, their faces twisted in agony. The images burned into the collective memory of every being that witnessed it, igniting a fire that had long been smoldering beneath the surface of humanity's quiet war with the Empire. Aboard a secretive human warship, a single word hung in the air, as sharp and bitter as the taste of blood. Enough. Captain Alara Quinn stood at the command center, her eyes cold as she watched the footage again. She'd seen countless atrocities committed by the Empire. But this was something different. It wasn't just an execution, it was a statement. And that statement had lit the fuse of a powder keg. Behind her, the bridge crew shifted uneasily, knowing what would come next. For years, humanity had played the waiting game. A war had been brewing, but they had kept to the shadows, working from the fringes, quietly building their strength. Until now, there would be no more silence. Captain, Lieutenant Rowe spoke, his voice low but unwavering. What do we do? Alara's gaze never left the hollow projection of the dead women. We end them. All of them. The words hung heavily in the air. No one spoke. No one needed to. The moment had arrived when humanity would stop hiding. The resistance would no longer be a whisper in the dark corners of the galaxy. It would be a storm. Alert all fleets, Alara continued, her voice hardening with every word. I want every strike team ready within the hour. The time for covert missions is over. We bring the fight to them now. The crew nodded in silent agreement, the weight of her words sinking in. The Galactic Empire had ruled with terror for millennia, squashing rebellions with ease, wiping out entire species that dared to rise against them. But what the Empire didn't realize was that humanity was different. They were survivors, and when pushed to the edge, there was no force in the galaxy that could match their fury. Across the galaxy, on a dusty world still bearing the scars of imperial occupation, a quiet revolution had begun. A network of resistance cells, once fragmented and hidden, now communicated with deadly efficiency. They'd watched as the Empire executed those women, and now they saw their chance for vengeance. From the smuggling lanes of outer rim space to the high-tech enclaves of human colonies, the call to arms was clear. The first strike came less than 24 hours later. A convoy of Imperial warships, transporting weapons meant for further oppression, was obliterated without warning. The Resistance's shockwave rippled across the galaxy, reverberating in the ears of every Imperial officer and citizen. Humanity had struck back, and the Empire was not prepared for the storm they had unleashed. On the flagship of the Imperial fleet, Admiral Varys Knox watched in horror as reports flooded in. The convoy had been obliterated in a matter of minutes, and the destruction was far too precise to have been random. No, this was planned. This was deliberate. Get me a status report. Knox barked, his voice crackling with authority. The officer at his side scrambled to gather the necessary data, his face pale. Admiral, it appears that the humans have organized. They've launched a coordinated assault. They're attacking from multiple fronts. Varys Knox clenched his fists. They dared to strike us? He wasn't sure whether it was the disbelief or the rising tide of anger that gripped him, but it didn't matter. He understood one thing. The humans had been underestimated for far too long. Prepare for retaliation, Knox growled. We'll make an example of them. Back aboard the human flagship, Alara Quinn's resolve hardened. This was no longer about politics or resistance. This was about justice. The women who had been murdered had names, families, lives that had been stolen. Their deaths would not be in vain. Humanity had been quiet for far too long. But now, as the first battles were fought and the fires of rebellion began to burn brighter, It became clear that the Empire's reign of terror was about to be shattered. And it would be humanity that would bring it down. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now it was paying the price. The shockwave of humanity's first strike rattled the galaxy. Imperial officers scrambled to defend their territories, unaware that their greatest threat wasn't just the soldiers they had sent to the front lines, but a force they had long ignored: humanity's unyielding will. Captain Alara Quinn stood before the hollow table, her gaze scanning the galaxy's map. Her fingers traced the routes of the most recent resistance movements, all converging toward one singular goal: the destruction of the Empire. The walls of the command center, once sleek and sterile, now felt charged with the weight of the rebellion's purpose. "We've made them bleed," Ilara muttered to herself, her voice soft but firm. Her crew stood in silence, the gravity of their situation settling in. The Empire would retaliate, and they would retaliate hard. But that was not the concern anymore. Humanity had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. "Captain," Lieutenant Rowe interrupted, his voice tense. "The Empire's retaliation fleet is mobilizing. If we don't escalate our efforts, we'll be crushed." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she turned to face Rowe. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation. The attack on the convoy was only the beginning. We need to strike at the heart of their operations now." The plan had always been clear: disrupt, sabotage, and destabilize the Empire's supply lines. But that had changed. The slaughter of innocent women had drawn a line in the sand, one that humanity would not allow the Empire to cross without facing consequences. The resistance was no longer a whisper in the dark corners of the galaxy. It was a force to be reckoned with. Across the galaxy, in the darkest corners of the Outer Rim, a small but determined fleet of human ships gathered. Each one bore the scars of years of hidden warfare, patched together with scavenged parts from countless battles. The crew was a mix of soldiers, rebels, and civilians, all united by one unrelenting cause: revenge. Among them was Mara, a former slave of the Empire, now one of the Resistance's fiercest warriors. She paced nervously across the cramped deck of her ship, her mind racing. The destruction of the Imperial convoy had sent a ripple through the Empire's command structure, and for the first time in years, Mara saw a glimmer of hope. "We've been waiting for this moment," she said aloud, though no one in particular was listening. "And we won't stop until they burn." The crew didn't need to be told twice. The Empire had done more than just occupy worlds. It had stolen everything from them. Now, the tables had turned. Humanity's thirst for justice was a wildfire, and it would burn through every Imperial stronghold in its path. Mara's ship, the Valiant Fury, was the flagship of the Resistance's most daring operation yet. Her target, the Empire's primary weapons facility on the world of Horus Prime, where they produced weapons capable of wiping out entire colonies. The mission was high risk, but failure was no longer an option. As the fleet approached the heavily fortified planet, Mara joined the rest of her team in the command center. The walls were illuminated by glowing red screens displaying the facility's schematics, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Prepare for Phase 1, Mara ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. "We hit them hard, hit them fast. No time to waste." The fleet launched its assault without hesitation. Hundreds of ships dropped from stealth, engaging the Empire's defenses with lethal precision. The clash between the two forces was violent and chaotic. Blinding flares of explosions lit the skies as weapons fire streaked through the darkness. Ilara watched from her flagship, eyes narrowing as the live feed of the attack came through. The Empire was scrambling, but it was clear that the humans had the upper hand. They had learned to fight with a ferocity no one had expected, a relentless drive that matched their ingenuity. Each ship moved with calculated precision, each fighter in the fleet acting like a well-oiled machine. For the first time in years, the Empire's war machine felt uncertain. "They won't expect us to hit their supply lines next," Ilara said, her voice steady, though there was a fire in her eyes. "But we will. No mercy." The battle raged on, and Mara's team breached the weapons facility with brutal efficiency. The corridors were dark, and the air was thick with tension as they advanced through the compound. Each step brought them closer to their target, the heart of the Empire's destructive power. Mara's hand tightened around the trigger of her plasma rifle as they neared the control room. She could almost taste the victory that awaited them. This wasn't just another raid. This was the beginning of the end for the Empire's reign. And as the final charges were set, the facility erupted in a deafening roar. The humans had done it again. They had struck at the very foundation of the Empire's strength, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Back on the human flagship, Ilara felt a rush of satisfaction. This was only the beginning. The Empire had tried to break humanity, to snuff out the flame of rebellion. But all they had done was ignite a war that would burn across the galaxy. Humanity was awake, and the Empire's nightmare had just begun. The galaxy had never known a war like this. The Empire was powerful, but humanity's fury was a force of nature. The first weeks of the Resistance's uprising had rattled the Empire to its core. But now, the true scale of the conflict was dawning on both sides. The Empire's retaliation was swift and brutal, its forces descending on human colonies with a merciless vengeance. Entire worlds were razed, cities burned, millions of lives lost. But humanity was used to survival. They had endured centuries of oppression, and now the fire of retribution had ignited in their hearts. Captain Ilara Quinn stood on the bridge of the Elysium, her flagship, watching as the holographic map of the galaxy flickered before her. The Empire was on the move, attacking human colonies, cutting off supply lines, and trying to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. But humanity's resistance was spreading like wildfire, a tide that refused to be extinguished. "Report," Ilara barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "Captain." Lieutenant Rowe's voice crackled from the comms. "The Empire's fleet is closing in on our last stronghold in the Elysian system. They're bringing everything they've got." Ilara clenched her fists, her eyes dark with determination. The Empire thought it could crush humanity in one swift blow. But they had underestimated something far more dangerous: human resolve. "We can't fight them head-on," Ilara muttered, thinking fast. "We'll need to outmaneuver them." Rowe nodded. "We've been preparing for a retreat into the outer sectors, but it's a long shot. Our resources are running thin, Captain." "Then we fight like hell," Ilara replied coldly. "We're not running. Not anymore." The Elysium turned sharply, heading toward the heart of the Empire's advancing fleet. Ilara knew that her plan would be risky, but the alternative was worse: total annihilation. If they could strike the Empire's command ship, they might cripple the entire fleet. It would be their only chance to survive. Meanwhile, on the war-torn planet of Gortha, Mara and her team had secured a victory, barely. The battle had been brutal, and the cost had been high. Buildings lay in ruins, bodies scattered across the streets, their faces frozen in terror. Humanity had fought hard, but the Empire's retaliation had been unforgiving. Mara stood in the midst of the devastation, her eyes hollow with loss. "Another victory," she muttered bitterly, as her team gathered around her. But at what cost? Her second-in-command, Tarek, shook his head. "This is just the beginning. The Empire won't stop coming. We've got to keep moving." "We will," Mara replied, her voice hardening. "We'll hit them where it hurts most. Every victory gets us closer." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. The Empire had unleashed its fury on Gortha, and she knew that humanity was far from ready to face the full might of its opponent. The rebellion was growing stronger, yes, but it was still young, vulnerable. Back on Elysium, Ilara prepared to launch her most desperate gambit yet. The Empire was closing in, and with each passing minute, the window for escape was closing fast. She knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity would live to fight another day or be crushed under the Empire's iron boot. As the fleet approached the Empire's command ship, Ilara ordered her crew to stand ready. The tension on the bridge was palpable, the silence deafening. No one spoke, knowing that the moment they had been building toward was about to arrive. "Launch all fighter squadrons," Ilara commanded. "We hit them hard, hit them fast, and make it count." No mercy. The human fleet surged forward, a swarm of vessels bearing the weight of their defiance. The Empire's flagship loomed ahead, an indomitable symbol of their might. But today, it would be their downfall. Ilara's fleet closed the distance, her ships darting through the dark expanse of space with the precision of a deadly predator. Explosions rocked the vacuum of space as the first wave of human fighters engaged the Empire's defenses. The battle erupted in a burst of laser fire and chaotic maneuvers. For a moment, it seemed as if the human fleet might falter. But Ilara's forces pressed on, relentless in their pursuit of victory. As the Elysium tore through the enemy lines, Ilara's eyes never left the target. The command ship was within range. It was now or never. "Prepare to launch the final assault," she ordered, her voice unwavering. Her crew was ready. The humans had nothing left to lose, and they would fight until their last breath. This was the war of the lost, of everything humanity had endured and the price they were willing to pay to finally be free. And the Empire would soon learn that nothing could stop the storm humanity had unleashed. The Empire had never feared anything more than the unknown. But today, humanity was about to make the Empire fear a force older than any weapon they had ever built. The ancient artifact lay in the center of the Resistance's hidden base, its gleaming surface pulsing faintly with an otherworldly energy. To most, it was just another relic, an old piece of forgotten history. To Ilara Quinn, it was the key to the galaxy's future. "We've deciphered the last of the codes," Lieutenant Rowe said, his voice thick with awe. He stood beside the artifact, a stone tablet inscribed with symbols no one had seen in centuries. "It's not just a weapon. It's something more." Ilara's eyes narrowed as she studied the object. The Empire had destroyed entire worlds in their pursuit of domination, using fear and terror as their tools. But this artifact, this weapon of unimaginable power, could turn the tide. It was the one thing that could tip the balance in humanity's favor, no matter how powerful the Empire seemed. "Does it work?" she asked, her tone cold and calculated. Rowe nodded. "It's functional. But the power it can unleash," he trailed off, shaking his head. "It's not something we should use lightly." Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the artifact. "We don't have the luxury of caution anymore. The Empire has made it clear they will wipe us out, no matter the cost. This is our chance." The decision had been made. Humanity would strike at the heart of the Empire, using the artifact to disrupt their most powerful weapon, their vast fleet. As the Elysium made its way toward the heart of the Empire's territory, Ilara knew the next phase of the rebellion would determine the fate of billions. The Empire had never seen anything like this before, and the price for defying humanity would soon become apparent. On the war-torn world of Vexor, Mara's team was deep in enemy territory, sabotaging Imperial communication hubs. The mission was simple: plant the explosive charges, destroy the data, and get out. But nothing was ever simple when the Empire was involved. They moved quickly, knowing the Empire would send reinforcements the moment the attack was detected. Mara's boots echoed through the narrow corridor as she advanced, her pulse rifle at the ready. Her team had already planted charges in the control room, but the risk of capture was high. The Empire's forces were closing in. "Charges set," Tarek whispered through the comms. "We've got 2 minutes before the Empire knows we're here." Mara's fingers tightened around her rifle. "Then let's make sure they're too late to stop us." The explosion rocked the building, sending shockwaves through the complex. Alarms screamed as the charges detonated, and the data hubs that stored critical Imperial communications were reduced to rubble. Mara didn't wait for the blast to fade. She motioned for her team to fall back. The escape route was through the maintenance tunnels, but that was the least of her concerns. The real threat was what came next, the Empire's retribution. They were already planning their next move, and it was going to be a brutal one. As Mara and her team made their way through the winding tunnels, the sound of approaching Imperial forces grew louder. But they were too far gone, already blending into the shadows as if they'd never been there. The explosion would delay the Empire for a while, but it wouldn't be enough to stop them for long. Back aboard the Elysium, Ilara stood before the artifact, her fingers grazing its surface. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered, an ancient weapon from a forgotten age, its design more sophisticated than anything the Empire had ever created. The energy that emanated from it seemed to pulse with purpose, as if it were alive, waiting for the right moment to unleash its power. "Captain," Rose said, stepping forward, "the Empire's fleet is on the move. They've detected our presence. We'll be in range of their flagship in less than 2 hours." Alara's jaw tightened. "We need to be ready." The artifact would need to be deployed carefully. Its energy, as Ro had warned, was volatile. But if they could control it, it could give them an edge unlike any other weapon in the galaxy. Alara's mind raced. If the humans were to succeed in this war, they couldn't afford to just survive. They needed to win decisively. The artifact could shift the balance, but only if they used it wisely. "Prepare the fleet," Alara commanded. "We're going in. Full assault on the flagship. If we can cripple their command, we take down their entire fleet." As the Elysium entered the heart of the Empire's territory, the tension aboard the ship was palpable. This mission would not only determine the outcome of this war, but also the future of humanity. Failure meant extinction. But Alara was resolute. Humanity had faced annihilation before, and it had fought back. Now, they had the chance to deliver the final blow to the Empire. And with the artifact's power at their command, they would not miss it. The Elysium dropped from a void, her engines roaring, as she dove headfirst into the heart of enemy territory. A dozen Imperial ships swarmed around the flagship, but none could match the fury that surged through the human fleet. The artifact pulsed with energy, its force becoming palpable as Alara prepared to unleash its power. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and humanity was finally poised to strike a blow that would send the Empire into chaos. The artifact's energy surged forward. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Empire had underestimated humanity's resolve. And now, that mistake was about to cost them everything. The battle raged across the stars, a ferocious clash between the human resistance and the might of the Imperial fleet. Alara Quinn stood on the bridge of the Elysium, her gaze fixed on the burning wreckage of an Imperial destroyer. The artifact had changed everything. What had once been a ragtag rebellion was now an unstoppable force, tearing through the Empire's defenses with ruthless efficiency. "We've breached their outer defenses," Lieutenant Rowe reported, his voice taut with urgency. "Their command ship is in range. We're ready to launch the final assault." Alara's eyes narrowed. This was the moment they had been fighting for. The Empire's flagship loomed ahead, a symbol of their endless power. But humanity was about to rewrite that narrative. The artifact, now fully activated, pulsed with raw energy, its power surging through the fleet. It was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of defiance. "Prepare the fleet," Alara commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "We strike now, or we never strike again." Across the battlefront, humanity's forces moved in synchronized precision. The Imperial fleet, caught off guard by the intensity of the human attack, scrambled to form a defensive line. But it was too late. The human ships were already upon them, their weapons blazing with the fury of every world the Empire had destroyed. The Empire's forces fought back, but their arrogance had left them blind to humanity's true strength. Alara's forces were relentless, their strikes calculated, hitting the Empire where it hurt the most, at the heart of their fleet. The human ships moved with the precision of a well-trained force, each ship a deadly instrument of war. In the midst of the chaos, Mara's team fought on the ground, engaging Imperial soldiers in fierce urban combat. The war had reached a fever pitch, with no room left for mercy. Every street corner was a battleground, every building a fortress to be taken. Mara's pulse rifle roared as she gunned down another Imperial soldier. "Keep moving," she shouted to her team, her voice hoarse from the adrenaline. "We're almost there." They had reached the heart of the Imperial stronghold, an underground command center where the Empire's final plan of retaliation was stored. The mission was simple: destroy it all. But the cost had been high. Every victory had come at a price, and the losses were mounting. "Charge is set," Tarek called, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We've got 1 minute." Mara nodded, her eyes scanning the room. The resistance had come too far to fail now. One final strike would cripple the Empire's ability to retaliate. They had to do it, no matter what. As the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the complex, Mara's team made their escape, running through the debris and smoke. The mission was a success, but the war was far from over. Back aboard the Elysium, Ilara watched the live feed of the ground assault, her heart racing. The resistance had fought on every front, but the real battle was still to come. The Empire's flagship was now within striking distance, and it would be a fight to the death. "Captain," Ro called, his voice tight with urgency, "the command ship is responding. They've deployed reinforcements. We won't have much time." Ilara clenched her jaw. The Empire had fought too long and too hard to let go of their power, but humanity had already broken their will. Now it was time to break their fleet. "Launch the final assault," she ordered, her voice cold with determination. The fleet surged forward, its weapons blazing as they closed in on the flagship. Imperial ships attempted to intercept, but humanity's resolve was unshakable. They fought with a fury that the Empire had never anticipated. Every shot, every maneuver driven by the memory of every life lost to the Empire's cruelty. The battle was chaos. Explosions lit the dark expanse of space, and the cries of dying ships echoed through the void. But amidst the destruction, one thing was clear. The Empire was crumbling. Their arrogance had cost them their fleet, and humanity's tide of vengeance was unstoppable. As the final blows were struck, the Imperial flagship began to break apart, its hull cracking under the weight of humanity's wrath. The victory was near. Ilara could feel it in her bones. "We've done it," Ro said, his voice quiet with disbelief. But Ilara knew better than to let her guard down. The Empire was not yet finished. Their defeat in this battle would only be the beginning. There would be more fighting to do, more lives to be lost. But for the first time in a long time, humanity had the upper hand. The Empire had underestimated them once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again, and humanity would ensure they never had the chance to. The Empire's greatest mistake was thinking they could destroy humanity with a single strike. Now, their final hour had arrived. In the midst of the shattered battlefield, where the remnants of the Imperial fleet drifted like broken husks, Ilara Quinn stood resolute. The Empire's flagship, once a symbol of invincible power, was reduced to debris. Around her, humanity's forces cheered in victory, but Ilara's gaze never wavered from the war-torn vista before her. "It's not over yet," she muttered under her breath. The battle had been won, but the war was far from finished. The true test of humanity's strength had always been its endurance. And now, with the Empire on the brink of collapse, Ilara understood the cost of their rebellion. Lieutenant Ro's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, we've received a distress signal from several colonies in the core systems. The remnants of the Empire's fleet are regrouping. They're preparing for a last-ditch stand." Ilara clenched her fists. "We'll finish this. No more running." Across the galaxy, humanity's victories were beginning to reshape the balance of power. But in the heart of the Empire's crumbling infrastructure, remnants of the Imperial government still clung to power, desperate to maintain their control. The time for negotiations had passed. The human rebellion had become a war for total liberation. "We need to strike fast and hit them where they least expect it," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault. This ends now." On the war-torn world of Talmar, Mara's team was already preparing for their next mission. The once beautiful planet was now a shattered ruin, its cities in smoldering ruins from the Empire's retaliation. But even in the destruction, hope had been reignited. The rebellion was spreading, and the tide was turning in their favor. "We're getting reports from several systems," Mara said, her voice low as she reviewed the data. "The Empire's command structure is crumbling, but there are pockets of resistance. We need to keep pushing forward." Tarek nodded. "We've seen this before, but this time we finish it." Mara looked out over the devastated horizon, the weight of their mission pressing on her shoulders. The lives lost, the endless battles. The Empire had left a trail of destruction across the galaxy, and it was time to end it once and for all. "We'll hit their last strongholds and eliminate any chance of regrouping," Mara said. "The Empire is finished. But if we leave them breathing, they'll only rise again." Back aboard the Elysium, Elara oversaw the final preparations. The Resistance fleet was ready. Their forces were stronger than ever, having united under one banner. The remnants of the Empire's leadership were cornered, with no hope of escape. It was time to deliver the final blow. "Captain," Rose said, his voice steady but with an edge of excitement, "we've located their command center. It's a fortress world, heavily fortified. But it's their last bastion." Elara's expression hardened. "Then we make sure they never rise again." With a final command, the human fleet surged toward the Empire's last stronghold. As they entered the system, Elara could see the glint of Imperial ships massing for their final stand. They had nowhere left to run. The battle was fierce. The Empire's remaining fleet was desperate, launching waves of fighters and heavy bombardments in a last-ditch effort to hold their ground. But humanity's forces were unyielding. They had the advantage now, and there was no going back. As the battle raged on, Elara's fleet pushed forward, relentless and unforgiving. The Empire's remaining ships were no match for the human fury. One by one, they fell. And then, as the final Imperial fleet collapsed into dust, the last remnants of the Empire's leadership were forced into surrender. On the shattered world of Talmar, as Mara and her team watched from the ruins of the Imperial stronghold, the news came through. The Empire had fallen. A victory, hard-won, echoed through the galaxy. Humanity had not just survived, they had triumphed. The war was over. But as Elara stood on the bridge of the Elysium, staring out into the vast expanse of space, she knew that the true cost of their victory was just beginning to be understood. The Empire was gone, but the galaxy would need to rebuild. And humanity, having risen from the ashes of war, would be the ones to lead that charge. The fight had been long, the sacrifices countless, but humanity had claimed its place among the stars, and they would never again be silenced.